My name is Moses Swaibu. I was involved in match fixing as a professional footballer. This is how crime works. The times I went to collect money or to handle some of the funds, I'd literally go into the restaurant, get a few takeaway bags, and that could have been 50 grand in that bag, wrapped up in like boxes. When you're so deeply involved in something, you're in your own world, because the last thing I'm thinking about, am I gonna get caught? I felt so empty at that time, it made me so cold, and it just got deeper and deeper. The first time I was approached, I believe I was 19 or 20 at Lincoln City. Delroy Facey, who was my teammate at the time, he'd played in the Premier League. We were playing a game away at Northampton. He's literally, it's very like blunt and simple. Come down to our room. Okay, let's go down. We're sat on a bed like teenagers with me and my two teammates. This white male who's Russians walked in and he identified himself as he's the person paying everybody the money. And all he said was, hey, you guys need to lose. When I first saw the 60,000, it was in euros. So when he actually put the money on the bed, he actually said to one of the players, you can go and sleep with it. Let me know how you feel in the morning. The following evening, I believe, we've travelled with the actual money on the coach, and every single player that was present, including Delroy, happened to be on the bench anyway. So we declined that offer. At that time, I was wanted by Premier League clubs. We went back to our rooms and we spoke about it. And none of us had made that amount of money, but everything was about career. I never had a baby. I barely had a girlfriend. So why would I compromise being involved in something where I could probably make 60 grand anyway if you work hard? But there's a process here now. It's almost, without you realizing it, it's a form of grooming without realizing you're being groomed. Why would I go and tell on my captain? Especially if I haven't had, between 16 and 19, any education on this, and more importantly, I'm a young professional that's only just started his career versus someone that's got over 200 appearances. I believe the second time, whilst I was approached and I was more, I'll say mature, it was really about choices. So the Chinese Syndicate was where the majority of fixes happened. It was 2011, 2012 season. I was registered to Bromley. We was doing a jog around the pitch. One of my teammates the second time was like, Moses, I have a meeting. There's a Chinese syndicate that wants to speak to us about match fixing. So I asked him, how many players do you need? And he said 5. Then I went to the players and I was like, look, this is what the deal is. You go to the meeting, you fix a game, you get paid. So the Mayfair Hotel was significant because it was the first time we'd ever turn around and met in a location. It was in the evening before the game, which was going to be played at Eastbourne. Mayfair Hotel has a really royal smell. It's very distinctive. Whilst we went into the bar, I remember my first time I had an old fashioned with a big ice cube and that orange in there. It just felt expensive. Whilst I looked around at my other teammates ordering cocktails, everybody was very much on a knife edge, and you can see it in their face because you didn't know what to expect. So when we went up, I think on the 4th floor, and just to paint a picture, when we walked into that room, the guy was chain smoking again. I saw loads of cigarette butts and he was sitting at the edge of the bed with his feet off the ground. And he was only like 5 foot tall. So as he started to speak and the right-hand man at the time spoke about the actions, it was a really calm and relaxed environment. And when they passed us over the white paper bags, we were paid in football in brown paper bags. So I knew what 2 grand felt like, or a few £1,000s, and it was much more than that. So we had a choice to make when we left, let them know within a few hours whether we want the game to go ahead so they can put on a bet. And the players met in the cars, and I said, I'm in. So Eastbourne versus Bromley, we were asked to concede 2 goals before 45 minutes in the first half, then play normal. I remember the first minute of that game, you had me and 4 of the other players. One of them was on the bench, but 3 players that were playing in that game. So the first thing, as I'm commanding and doing things, was like, let's sit in. But then players who are not in on the fix are giving them the ball. He's going down the line, beating a person, beating another person, 1v1, hits the post. And I'm like, this is the complete opposite of what we said we're going to do. Second attack, the other guy does it. Third attack, we should have been 3-0 up rather than 0-0. So as I was giving out instructions, I told the team to sit back and play with a low block. So rather than attack, let's just sit in our half, and depending on the type of movement, they'll have openings. Braveheart, who wasn't in on the fix, has given away a penalty. They score 1-0. Up until the point, the panic really set in, because as we was playing that low block, it was only until Eastbourne have crossed the ball and the players actually handballed the ball in the area and the penalty was given. I didn't realise at the time someone had been sent to watch our game. Somebody saw the whole thing, which was the middleman. After that game, the players came a few hours later and it was just kamikaze the whole night. It was arguing, going back and forward, why they're not being paid, etc., etc., up until the following day when we went to Canning Town and received the money. I had a white SLK at the time, which was completely tinted. I saw like, it was probably 50 kilos. Like, he literally looked like a teenager. And he had like, what was it, 3 or 4 Sainsbury's bags. And I'm like, surely that can't be him. Surely that can't be him. Then as he gets closer to the car and I open my door, he just says a name, which was the middleman's name, just drops the money in the footwell. And as I'm sitting down on the car, I had my seat low and my hands on the wheel. And as I've like jerked the car forward, it's gone back and the money's just falling out. So at the time, I just remember that the middleman was laughing, put on French music. And this was probably the first time I've ever driven that car with 2 hands on the wheel, looking straight. We travelled from Canning Town to Rotherhithe Tunnel to Tower Bridge to over the bridge, and I was like panicking the whole way. So it was probably the first time I actually done the speed limit in that car. When we got back to the Mayfair Hotel, the players were just infuriated. To be honest with you, I didn't have an emotion when I took that money. I didn't care. That was the first time I'd actually spoken to the main person, because he wanted to guarantee the money was received. And as my Bluetooth was connected and I spoke to him, he just told me bluntly, like, you're going to take over. After that meeting, there was like quite a delayed gap for the next fix. They wanted to penetrate English football at the time. So they wanted me to help them initially in the beginning to try and find people that's played like a high level, that are quite senior and mature, because they're coming to the back end of their career. But that was a tough task, because at the time I'm only 24, and that was like another high level version of what they wanted to do. So over the span of the first fix compared to every other fix that happened after that, they call it data and analytics now. So they knew much more about us than we knew about ourselves from a football point. How many times you use your left and right foot? Where are you vulnerable? How many crosses does the team have? How do you now study the opponent? So the language that they spoke about the data was so important, because if you were highly analytical in your defender, you're the last line of defense, so you see everything. If you're a midfielder, it's a different perspective, because they may turn around and be like, well, we want you to just hold this line and defend deep because it invites pressure. When you look at spot fixing and match fixing, even though they're very much similar things, you need to look at the way the betting markets are operating. So for example, spot fixing can look like, all I want you to do is get a yellow card in the first 10 minutes, then you can play normal. It's much easier to spot fix than it is to match fix. So we actually spot fixed a lot more than we match fixed. And if you include a yellow and red card, that can be anything from 5 to 10 grand. So you don't actually have to win or lose a game. Or if he turns around and they say, well, we need you guys to concede between 70 and 80 minutes, that game may be tight. But then what I realized, oh, well, he's actually got the other team as well. Because what you'll find in crime, you always think you're the main person or you're the central figure in your mind, but then you don't realize that you're almost collateral damage, because you're almost Nemo in this big pond. So when we started meeting other teams and we were meeting up, and I realized that if you almost control one person, that can move specific markets and indicators. And if you look at where in America point shaving is, that line of movement now is detected by data. But then how many of these data people actually go and see these games live? So how can you tell me if a game's fixed or not? The Chinese Syndicate, they had a very stringent hierarchy, if I say that. So the main player, or the main man, I probably saw him 2 to 3 occasions. His right-hand man was actually a student. He was almost the head of the whole operation. He was able logistically to move amounts of money through couriers, traffickers, how the players are getting paid, what markets the bets are being put on, and create an infrastructure with me where I can locate players on inside information and squads on what's going to happen. We trained on Tuesdays, Thursdays played on Saturdays, but from Monday to Sunday, I was always in direct dialogue with their right-hand man at the time. And the games that weren't being fixed, because not every game was fixed, I just got to understand their business and their reasons as to why they have such a successful globalized version of what they do. So for example, the times I went to collect money or to handle some of the funds, I'd literally go into the restaurant, say my name, say an order, go into the back, come back, get a few takeaway bags, and that could have been 50 grand in that bag wrapped up in like boxes. On an average day, I'd wake up, a lot of the conversations we'll have will be on Skype or Telegram. Every Monday would be a review of what happened on the weekend. I may wake up to an emoji of angry face. That means something's gone wrong. Or Sunday morning, I'll wake up to a thumbs up. That means business has done well. So the levels of communication weren't sentences and paragraphs and, hey bro, what you doing? It was very much emoji based. When I saw angry face, that meant another team had done something wrong and the boss wanted to speak to me to find out inside information on what's happening. We've lost 250 grand, for example. I'm like, okay, well, even though that has nothing to do with me, what do you want me to do? Just find X, Y, and Z out. Okay, go to the restaurant, pick up £1,000. Let me know in 2 days what you find. I don't find anything, he gives me another £1,000. Find some more, come on. Emoji, 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 I'm angry. Just do your job. Don't ask too much questions because that's a form of paranoia. I didn't see a threat to life. I wasn't given a bullet or a gun and said, hey, I'm gonna kill you if this happens, because I never ran away with the money. And more importantly, if you start asking questions, you now put your name and place into conversations that don't need to be had, because what you're asking is structure. I've never heard of a coach or a referee or official even being offered a bribe or a bung. It was purely the players, simply because of risk. One conversation with a referee, a coach, or anyone outside the players will bring everything down.
Corruption does exist within the world of referees.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. But I think what we need to remember is scope and location. Even at the lower tiers, there's still a good governance for officials, which allows fans and people watching those games to know that the referees and coaches have not been compromised. What you'll find in match fixing, it usually comes from my experience with someone that's trusted. The gambling culture in sport is rife. So if I'm 30 years old, for example, and I see that young player coming into the team and I'm playing blackjack at the back of the coach, I'm gonna be like, hey, come and play a game. Then that young player is seeing us bet £1,000 and he may get approached if he gets released. And they may turn around and say, okay, well, you don't have to do anything, just go and get me a player's name. That's £500. Or if the syndicate needs other players to book hotels or for them to go undetected, I can give you £1,000 for booking the Hilton Hotel. Football's a relationship-based business, so your character is very key, because if you, for example, turn around and said to me at the time, Moses is match fixing, but I'm your captain, then the psychological effects, almost in a very highly toxic, egotistical way, is you're almost killing people softly without realizing that a lot of this money and system, again, comes back to one thing: who's influential and what type of relationships you have. At that time at Bromley, I was very close with the manager. The manager, in and around New Year's, told me I wasn't getting paid because I was having my daughter. So then he gave me the fire to justify everything I've done, to say, you know what, I made the right decision. Then when you're speaking to other players and they haven't been paid, the conversation's easier. Hey, look what the gaffer sent to me. If he thinks that about me, and more importantly, I haven't got a contract that's really worth anything apart from the paper it's been printed on, how can you tell me to miss my midwife appointment because we've got a game on a Saturday? And I can almost use this as an advertising tool to every single player that I speak to. Look how managers are treating us. Because it's all a form of manipulation, and more importantly, that manipulation can pinpoint anybody. Could you imagine if players were injured? You know, could you imagine if you owed somebody money? Could you imagine if your captain said, hey, speak to me, what's your problems? Oh, Moses, you know what? I want to get a wedding ring, I want to propose. Take £5,000, pay me back whenever you want. Because all you need to do is ask one person a favour. You know what? On 20 minutes, I just need you to concede. Why, Moses? I don't need to tell you why, just do it. If you go and do that, I'll give you £10,000. Why would he say no? And we have that bona fide relationship where we've actually gone into legitimate games in Truro, fought relegation battles, and everybody's running around each other and we're all happy and we're drinking beers. The last thing you're going to think about me and other people is, what you're actually involved in. Football's a very tight niche industry from the top all the way down to the bottom. The 2 players that I reached out to was the 2 occasions things went wrong. Remember, I learned how to do this myself. Player 1, he done such a good job, the boss pushed me to the side and only wanted to deal with him. This player went and got the goalkeeper. Something that's the holy grail, if you have the goalkeeper. Off the back of that, we went into a game where, because of his involvement, the whole fix was played out like a theatre. Everything you could imagine went wrong. The fans heard it, the players heard it. The second player was Michael Boateng, who actually did not fix any football match. He just happened to know me, I gave him money, I introduced him to Dora, and within a month or so, imagine somebody that's never been arrested goes from being arrested to now being put in jail. So those 2 scenarios are a variation of, I was able to use my influence in a team to allow the work I was doing to speak volumes to other people without realising it's me. I really started off as a group. The first interactions were always with me, and I'll say between 3 and 5 players. After the group, when we actually fixed the game, I then went into, I'll say probably more a senior role because of what I'd done. The almost final role was me now being my own betting app, company, bookmaker. I'll say if we start at the top, the Premier League's better governed. The payments are astronomical. Like any other sporting league or federation, as you go down, you're less paid. I was playing, I believe, at step 5 or 6 at the time, so it was a level below the conference. I was probably on £800 to £1,000 in cash in the Premier League. It's watched by millions. The level that I'm playing at is watched by a couple of hundred people, if that. So first of all, you start off by taking pocket money. And whilst you're sitting there with them, you're almost giving them the inside scoop of, okay, well, this is how this manager plays. At this point, if this team has a successful FA Cup run, you'll know in non-league, they usually have a worse season. So behind the scenes, managers and clubs that have good FA Cup runs, lower level, get paid, and they don't really worry about the season because they've secured funding for the following couple of seasons. So when you're speaking and sitting down and going back and forward with these, you almost formulate a plan. And part of that plan, you need players. If you have 5 players, it's great. If you have a few players, it's even better because do you have a few players on your team or could you balance it out 3 and 3 or 1 on 1 or 2 and 2? If you have 1 player for team A and 1 player for team B, that's even better than having 5 players because these 2 players, all they need to do is create spot fixing elements where you concede in the first half, you concede in the second half. If you were to go into a normal bookies and say 20 teams are all going to win, what's the likelihood of that actually happening? But imagine going into this system knowing that 20 teams are actually going to win and there's a 99.9% return on that. So then when the money comes, if that's a few million, how do you now launder and wash that money? Because that can come in a week.
Was there a point where any of your friends or family were just like, kind of see that you've got a bit of money now, like what's going on? And did you have to lie to them?
To be honest, it's a great question because they only found out until I'd done the podcast. So I was on a BBC podcast called Confessions of a Match Fixer that came out in August of 2024. We'd done a listening for the podcast. That was the first time my family found out. The only person that half knew was my brother, but not to the extent. So again, that journey was the hardest thing I've had to do because I've had to go back and revisit people I ain't seen for 15 years. So their version of Moses was Moses that played football. So 15 plus years later, hearing that, the room was silent. My mum didn't know. My sister didn't know.
Didn't know the extent.
They didn't know anything. We are part of this almost chessboard. So for example, I used to play centre-back. If I play left or right side centre-back, I can be hugely influential throughout the whole team.
If I was watching a match, for example, how would I be able to spot that it was fixed?
I don't think you would. The only way you could potentially spot it, I'll give you an example. We could watch an international game or a Premier League match. The defender slips and a goal goes in. It's match fixing. Because when someone does something that isn't really of the normal, you're going to be like, this match was fixed. Or like, it's just human nature. Even before I was match fixing, I was like, that looks odd. Why would he go and do that? But then again, when you're on the pitch, mistakes happen. And this is why it's so sophisticated because you can never really tell. What data can do is detect and with different technologies help you understand it. I'll give you an example. If you look at a football pitch, depending on the pattern of play, the style of play, the positioning, you'll be able to tell if you're an experienced defender, why are you marking the wrong channel or the wrong side in this specific moment? Or if you're an experienced striker, how have you angled your body at this moment and taken that shot and it's just gone a yard off the post? Or if you're a midfielder, why you're not as mobile as what you are? Because if you look at that and you compare it to the market and bets that are placed on that game, any line or movement on an illegal market will kind of help you understand, oh, was that game fixed? But how many fans do that, if that makes sense? When you watch a game, you don't watch a game to think it's fixed. You watch a game because you love the sport and more importantly, it's fair. And it's an equal playing field. And that's why betting markets exist. So the Chinese Syndicate, they had a system. And on that system, I saw the amounts being placed on that market and there was a delay. So for example, if they had a market open in Asia, they could put on a delay in live time because at that time, obviously data and analytics weren't what it was. All of our matches were being transmitted and recorded. One of the mules sat in the crowd. Every fix that was agreed, we'll put our hands up or make an acknowledgement. He's recording the game with a headset and he's telling the market or he's telling the principal exactly what's happening. So whilst the market's moving and bets are being placed and where they are, more people are putting on markets because that can be the only game that's fixed on that market at that time. So imagine knowing A, the outcome's going to happen and B, what the scores are going to be. So that little line movement from my understanding at that time was what made them considerable amounts of money. So towards the end of my fixing career, if you want to call it that, I had two options. Do I go and expand this into Europe and the UK? Do I become my own bookmaker? I had the cash and the liquidity. I can now understand enough about how to get illegal bets on to make margins. But then off the back of doing that, I also had a daughter on the way. And the last almost fix that we done, whilst I retired from football, I was caught between a rock and a hard place because I knew where the money was and more importantly, I had access to that money before I was actually arrested. And I didn't realise, I was probably depressed at the time without realising what that looks like. I left Bromley. I was at Whitehawk for a few weeks and Sutton for probably like a month or two. And funny enough, when I went to Sutton, I felt that feeling and buzz again, but then I was like, I don't think I can play here without match fixing. I don't have that same hunger or desire. Let me leave. I've left, contemplating retirement. Michael's rang me because he was at Whitehawk, going back and forward to the manager, and he was like, yeah, we want to offer you £350. But what he didn't realise, I was already a millionaire by then. So it wasn't about the money. So as I'm being pulled back, something's telling me, expand this business. But let's not make any excuses here. It's very simple, it's greed. You know, the more of something you get, you want more. Because ultimately you have to remember, whilst I'm going through this, nobody knows. I'm not speaking to friends, I'm not speaking to family, I'm not speaking to my girlfriend. Then I got roped back in again. So I'm almost having a battle with myself saying, I want to get out, okay, I get out, what am I going to do? And I'm sitting at home. Then I still have access to this international network and they're telling me, you've done what you've done in the UK, let's go and build this in Europe and international. And that's when I met the third syndicate. So we had the Russians in the beginning, the Chinese, and the last dance, if you want to call it, was the Singaporeans. It actually started or stemmed from Australia. So there was a bunch of players that played at the same level that we played. They went over to Australia and they were match fixing. So I believe they had to spend a significant amount of time over there. But I remember, as I knew one of those players, I remember ringing him, what was happening? And he vaguely told me then, lo and behold, that stemmed from a guy called Terry Steens doing his own investigation to find out the route maps as to other English players potentially that were involved in match fixing. So Wilson Perumal Raj has been convicted for match fixing charges internationally. So through Wilson, he met Chan Sankaran and Krishna Ganashesh. They were paid by the Telegraph at the time to come to the UK. Obviously, they didn't know that was an investigation, but they were given 60,000 by the Telegraph to find players. They happened to have a channel to Delroy Facey. Delroy Facey happened to have a channel to me, and I had a channel to Michael Boateng. Michael Boateng at that time, we had played at Crystal Palace's academy. He was 2 years younger than me. So he was the one person that I spent the most time with because He knew match fixing was happening, but he didn't know it was me. So by the time he found out, I didn't want him to get involved, and I gave him like a loan for his car without me realising I'm actually inducing him. Following on from that, he found out I was fixing, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to do it with you. I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm going to introduce you to Dell. Michael was actively playing. He had control and leadership over Whitehawk. He could potentially manipulate and pinpoint what I'd done at Eastbourne. And all I was going to do then was say, here's A, here's B, this is the pot, that's how much I'm taking, and not actually have an involvement up until Michael lied to me. Why would you go to a meeting and meet the NCA without realising and not tell me? So when I rang him, I heard the trembling in his voice from that lie. Michael, where are you? Why are you asking? No, I don't ever speak to you like that. Why, what's up? Then I knew, because of what I was being told by the syndicate, he was lying. And that game was like 60 grand if it happened. He would have took obviously the lion's share, but I wanted to teach him a lesson. But then my ego got in the way. So as my ego is getting in the way and I've gone to Kings Meadow and I've got tickets and I've met the new syndicate, part of me being there was to teach Michael a lesson. And as I'm trying to teach him a lesson, that's how I got arrested. 2013, I was arrested. The day that I met Shankaran and Sham for the first time, they'd come from Manchester on my direction, the match was fixed. We agreed 5 grand if the game was successful and I got 20. So at half time, I was like, where's the money? Because you haven't given it to me, but let's go to a local restaurant. Went to a local Asian restaurant, sat down, we're talking, he hands me a bag. I've gone into the toilets, counted it, there was 3 grand. And I'm like, 3 and 5, what's the difference? 2, is that what we're arguing about? Then I was actually saying to myself, why am I even here? So we start arguing, and he's arguing, and obviously we're the only people in the restaurant. Then a blonde woman walks in. I'm like, that's odd. So as we're arguing, she sits right next to us on the table. And I'm thinking, we're in the middle of Kingston. She's got heels on, blonde hair, glasses on, and I'm like, she should be in Mayfair. This is odd. So as I'm arguing with Chan, my friend Benji at the time is with Krishna. Then a male walks in, and I'm like, he's in a suit. I was like, what's going on? So then he walks around in the same kind of like way she did, and he sits down, and like their body language is turned like next to us. And my heart's just pumping, and my instincts kicked in, and I was like, I gotta go. I called Ben. Ben was taking forever, even though it may have been a minute, it felt like a long time. Then as Chan's shouting, it's like, oh, look, you ripped me off, this, that, the third, give my money back. Ben comes, Krishna comes. We walk out the restaurant, and I'm like, Ben, let's just get to the car. Then as we got to the alleyway, I just heard footsteps. Then I remember they shouted at NCA, but I didn't know what they were. Then I just remember freezing, not being able to move. It weren't normal handcuffs. They put like these and like strings. I was like, when I watch the films, this is what murderers get put in, or like, this must be serious. Then they're like, we're the police. Then it wasn't until they said, you've been arrested for conspiracy to defraud the betting trade. The first thing I asked them, because my girlfriend was cooking a chicken curry, and I was like, I'll be back in an hour. First thing on my mind, what's Crystal gonna say? Then after that, I saw the woman and I saw the man with normal police handcuffs. I was like, oh, damn. Then when we came out, all of the cars opposite the restaurant and outside the ground were all police cars with lights. Then where Ben got arrested and Krishna got arrested, so the observation or the obo that they had, they followed Krishna from Manchester, didn't know who he was meeting. He ran into us and they've now got their case. The National Crime Agency in the UK were the law enforcement agency that led our investigation. The NCA had been given a case file by the Daily Telegraph at the time, many months after the season had ended, because after the 2012-13 season, the NCA had caught the third syndicate because the game that I invited them to, AFC Wimbledon versus Dagenham and Redbridge, was the game I said that was fixed. So whilst they had an observation, they bunged the rooms, they had live recordings, they heard us speak about fixing, etc. But they never knew about all of the other games that were fixed in the previous season. The people at the top of the pyramid were never brought to trial. But Chan, Sankaran and Ganeshesh, I believe, they got 5 years. Delroy served 2.5 years in prison. He was convicted with me on the second trial. And Michael Boateng served 16 months a year before I went to prison. We both got 16 months. I done 4 months in prison, 4 months on the HDC tag. Then the rest of my sentence was outside on licence. You know what, this might sound controversial, yeah, but I think getting a prison sentence is just a word. being rehabilitated is what we're looking for here. People make mistakes. I've made mistakes, but more importantly, I believe everybody deserves a second chance. And I feel part of the guilt, even now, that kind of lives with me is knowing, even though I've transitioned and I've come out the other end, Michael hasn't. Dora hasn't. They got bans. I was banned for 15 years. I'm the only person that went to the FA and actually admitted, like, this is what I've done, how can I help?
Did any of your colleagues really find out towards the end that you were fixed in?
I'll say 2020, I'm playing local football, and a player who obviously knew about what was happening. I've seen him and I've said hello, and the response I got was quite cold. Then I remember him saying, do you know how much you affected me? Because the league and people found out that match fixing in you was involved, that affected me and the team. Nobody wanted to sign me. There was a question mark on all of us. He didn't want to make any money. He just wanted to play football. I'm not in football no more. So when I meet people or I come across them, their version of Moses Swaibu was the version of everything before 2015. They don't see the reform or change because there's no interaction. And for whatever reason, I was saved by actually going to prison. That sounds quite scary. Prison actually saved my life. If I did not go to prison and I wasn't arrested that day, I would have either been dead on a first-class flight ticket to Singapore or one of the biggest match fixers that have ever existed, because that's what my mentality was and that's where my mind was going. It's almost like Jekyll and Hyde for those who haven't read it. I've gone from being the most enthusiastic and passionate and I'll die for this game to I hate this. I don't even want to see a football. And there was no middle ground here. It's either it was really good or it was really bad. And I think for me, part of the worst place any human being can do is when you're stripped from almost your human rights and who you are. You're given a number, rock bottom is sitting down in that prison cell, looking outside the window, realizing for the foreseeable future, this is my life now. In prison, I didn't speak to nobody. I didn't want to have any outside interest with the world apart from my daughter. And I feel within that almost allowed me to hate the game even more, because the accountability wasn't really taken until I actually sat down and understood who I was. I left prison in 2015. A week after I left prison, I went and done an interview at the FA for my tribunal. Following on that, they put together quite quickly an integrity education format for Premier League players. Then that was my first real role around working for the first time. I've been very fortunate to go and speak at the European Council with 10 plus countries ratifying a convention that says we're going to sign up to this treaty for anti-corruption. I've spoken to attorney generals, prime ministers, directors at FIFA and in the world, like the Olympic Committee, and I would have never been able to have these conversations had it not been for my story. The book is called Fixed, My Secret Life of a Match Fixer. The book is over 280 pages of the rawest version of a corruption story in sport you're ever going to hear. Probably from my time, football and the sporting industry have improved in adding an integrity officer. Those integrity officers are doing multiple courses around how to help that individual. I think where things fall short is having sufficient enough evidence from just being approached in order to make sure that the right framework's done. Just having the bravery to turn around and do the right thing is the first step. And again, that can include telling anybody that you give that information to that's trusted. So between 2015 and 2019, I've been into every single Premier League club. In a season, I've been approached by several players in 4 years. People coming up to me and saying, oh, you're Moses, right? Yeah, I saw your story. By the way, such and such happened at this period of time, or I was approached this time, but I reported it and done the right thing. You can slowly bet within reason because it's legal, because what we don't realise, athletes have a lot of time. So you train a couple of hours, you go home, what are you doing with your time? So the algorithm on your phone is getting betting, gambling. Every session I've done with young players, the first question they ask me is, why are we sponsored by a betting company? And we're not allowed to bet. Oh yeah, because that's the rules. And I actually can't explain it because I don't work for BetX or whatever company it is. And what you find is this generation of player goes to become a full international and a player and earns loads of money, I'm pretty sure if you were to do a survey of 10 players, you'll probably have more than half that have either used some form of app or betting. For example, if you compare it again to 2025, I don't need to go into the bookies. I can download an app, register a name, get my family member to place bets on there, and it doesn't link back to me. To my knowledge, there isn't a significant law that actually governs what match fixing is. People who are tried and convicted are usually convicted around bribery and fraud charges. When you go outside of the UK, mainly in Europe, part of the struggles that they have is the time period spent from an investigation to actually getting a criminal conviction. And within that time, a player or athlete can still play and operate. So there's a significant lack of evidence because there's not enough people coming forward and explaining the different types of approaches. I don't think it's a situation about what league, as we're seeing. This happens in the Premier League, the most watched league in the world, in the whole world, with billions of people. At the lower league, it's going to happen. Maybe there's less scrutiny because nobody watches it, but corruption doesn't discriminate against you because you're higher or you're lower. As long as, again, there's a live betting market and there's an opportunity for people to make money, crime's always going to exist.
Hi, I'm a producer on How Crime Works. If you enjoyed this video, then please subscribe and comment below with more ideas of topics you'd like us to cover in this series.